It is the creativity and ingenuity which brings us together, and I think it is all of us, we want to make a difference in our surrounding, in our community, and in the world, and that binds together, and that's why we all of us are here. Thank you for coming. They basically started my introduction, so I don't have to say much about the introduction. I studied at NIFT, New Delhi, and I studied social anthropology at SOAS, University of London. I work with weavers, and I'll start my journey. I was working in Delhi in home linens, and I was making beautiful cushion covers. One cushion cover after another cushion cover, bed covers, curtain. And after a certain time, I couldn't associate what I was doing, and it was becoming monotonous. And I thought, I am not actually here for this, and I want to make a difference. I am born for something different. It was summer 2005. Here, I got an opportunity to go to visit this village, Jarmundi, in Dongria district of Jharkhand, to work with Santali Adivasi women. It was a very, very small campus. Women came from very difficult backgrounds. Some of them were also accused of witchcraft. They were living there, and some of them were single women by choices. And I saw the campus, very beautiful green. And the bathroom, you can imagine, that was made from coconut leaf mats, and the blue sky was my ceiling. It was a very good beginning, and it was an opportunity. When I started talking to them about the work they are doing, they shared their textile stories in applique craft that talked about the people, talked about the land, talked about their relation with the nature, and the stories some of the stories were also personal stories. That time, coming from a design background, I thought they didn't go to design school. As a designer, I went to design school where we talk about forecast, colors, summer colors, this and that. And look at the power of Santali women, their ability to visualize and their ability to translate their ideas into textiles. And that is like a power, for me. And they told me about the birds, about the ancestors. They said that our ancestors were birds, Purvaj, and they basically came from the hills. And that's a very strong relation what they have with the nature. That's the human relation with the nature that reflects in the textile. And that was basically a breakthrough I was waiting for, and that became a breakthrough in my life. In 2006, I decided to come back to my native state, Orissa, and the first area I wanted to visit was Niyamagiri Hills in the Raigada district of Orissa. So I met some of the local people here, and I was told this area is not approachable. So I decided that I'll definitely go, I'll take the challenge, and I was determined to visit the village. And I wanted to see the Dongria Kon textile, and I also wanted to meet the women behind the textile who are making these beautiful textiles. In the same year, I got an opportunity to work with Dongria Kon women for 15 days. It was a project supported by Orissa government, Director of Handicraft and Cottage Industries. During the workshop, because they speak Kui Bhasha, I could speak Odia, and obviously I could understand a little bit of Kui, but not so much. So language was a barrier, but it didn't restrict us. So we decided to use our body gestures, pointing fingers to learn, and it became our mutual learning. And I asked them, to learn the motive, I basically pointed on each motive. What is this? They said Kudalinga, that is the goddess of the house. What are the circular patterns? Those are the eyes of the goddess, it is called Kanka. What are those diagonal lines? There's a Keri, that means basically the farming. And that basically, when I started weaving it together, I realized it is the story of Niyamagiri Hills, it is the story of Niyamaraja, it is the story of nature. Kons believe that nature is their god, nature is the creator, and they are basically children of the forest. And that is a very symbolic relationship, and that relationship reflects in the textile, and it's just not a product, and it is a sacred textile. Part of my workshop was to create design products, but I didn't want to introduce something which is not familiar to them. I wanted to basically create something where they can participate, we can collaborate, and we can create something together. So I started the dialogue. Can we create a bag in your design so that you can go to the market and carry your stuff? They said, yes, Didi, we can. Then I said, can you make a muna means pouch, in your design so that you go to the market and you store money and you tuck it in your sari? Yes, Didi, we can. I said, I can see a beautiful belt you're wearing. They wear a beautiful belt that is made of metal. I said, can you make a belt in your design? You can also wear in the similar way. Yes, Didi, we can. This was a mutual way of learning together rather than a top-down situation of collaborating, learning, an equal equation, and where I was learning and both of us was learning. And in that process, I learned that a design process is a very collaborative process. It cannot be one way. It has to be a dialogue, and it has to be both way learning process. This is another village, Lamtaput in Koraput district of Orissa. I knew that Kerang, Gadwa Adivasi, used to weave a cloth called Kerang. The story of Kerang also, basically, it was red in blue and white color. It was made similar to the tiger print so that they could go to the forest and they could basically become invisible while hunting. So when I went in 2017, this was part of Sahapedia-UNESCO fellowship. Every village where I went, I was told, Kerang has died. Kerang is a thing of past. Aage kale karuthile, that's in their tone. Earlier days people used to do it. Nobody weaves. So everybody said, no, it is not there, it is not there. And in some of the houses, some of the women took out a piece of Kerang. My aunt used to do it, or my grandmother used to do it. And they had a memory, they had a souvenir, but a cloth like Kerang had died. So what is Kerang? Kerang is made of the bark cloth. It is a bark cloth. And if we think about bark cloth takes us to that period of time when human being dependent on nature for survival and existence. And that textile existed some decades ago and it has died. And it is actually a shame, and we should be, feel sad that we had such a beautiful textile, it has almost died. And I did not know what to do and how to basically weave the stories because I wanted to know about Kerang. So I basically sat in a village, I started drawing the old form of the loom, part of my education, my textile education, and then one by one, the community people, the village people participated. And they said, yes, this is how you used to do it. Yes, this is how, so these are the poles. Yes, these are the threads. And the people, used to weave it. And you'd fix it here, you fix it. And then, and then a very old lady who was not able to talk, she said, yeah, this is how you beat it. And suddenly one man, he comes up and he takes out some tools. And he shows me, these are the tools my grandmother used to, use for making a kerang. And that was a community participation. And it was quite an achievement, I would say, because Kerang has died, but there is some kind of a memory, there is some kind of, knowledge. Nobody knows the textile, people have forgotten, but it still can be created. Then one Gadma man said, "Ama bhasa sarigala, sitipai Kerang sarigala," which means our language died, that's why Kerang died. Which basically means there's a law of the nature when one species died, another species dependent on it also dies. And the culture also dies, the craft also dependent on the nature, on the, on the craft or the community, that also dies. Another beautiful memory I recollect that is from Ganjam. We talk about a word called circular economy nowadays, but this technique existed in India and all the villages of India, and I'm sure in other parts of the world also, of preserving material, reusing material, recreating material. When I first visited the village, women were basically so happy to be filmed, to be interviewed. They were never acknowledged again for their craftsmanship. This is a beautiful cloth, which is the base cloth, the white cloth that is collected during the funeral ceremony. Women store it in a bundle. They, layer 7 layers of old saris together. They use borders of the sari together, stitch the 7 layers of together, and make this as a souvenir, as a dowry item. And also some young women, they prepare it before marriage. Sometimes mother also prepare it for their daughters. So this textile, which is called Gontha in Ganjam, existed In Odisha, example of circular economy, example of reusing material and reshaping and recreating something. And when you see a piece like that, you will always, a piece of textile on the quilt, you will always recollect, okay, when I went to the market, I bought this textile. So these are basically reweaving stories together into a single piece of textile. This was my collection, which was showcased at Lakme Fashion Week. This was organic cotton and natural dyes. And it was on the Sustainable Day, and it was highly appreciated. I talked about the rural drapes of Orissa, of Adivasi people who wear, and I talked about how the rural drapes were very, very functional. They had pockets. And they also basically, they used to wear sari in such a way that they could hold the child, in the sari. And I wanted to show the versatility and the beauty of the rural drapes of Orissa. This was a textile art installation I made for Bhubaneswar Art Trail. It happened when the international hockey was happening in Orissa. And this was basically talked about permanence and impermanence, reflection of time and nature, how with time and nature things change. Nothing is permanent and everything changes with time. So it is a very expanded fabric which I have created, a huge and large size where you can see the fabric, the pores of the fabric very closely, and that reflected basically talked about life, how basically everything changes with time, and the fabric is expanded, and it was made at 6 panels I had made using cotton and jute. This was my artwork, Flaming Boom, which went to Nairobi Summit for ICPD, that is International Conference for Population Development 25, supported by UNFPA. And it talked about basically the artwork. You know about, say in our Indian folklore, we worship nature as goddess, as the supreme goddess, mother as the creator, and this is a basic yoni is an iconic stylized form of female genita and a symbol of sexuality and also symbol of fertility. Through my artwork in deep red color, I am questioning the patriarchy by worshipping yoni or by worshipping the goddess. Are we trying to control the nature? Because we talk about goddess, but in reality, the women are suffering. The rules are made for only women, and also the issues of women are universal. It's just not India. So this is basically talks about their resistance, their anger in my deep red color. This was one panel, but I had made 6 panels together, which I rolled up and had taken to Nairobi, and my artwork was very much appreciated over there, and this was a huge piece which was hanging from the wall. So I basically want to sum up in a way that an entire journey, my textile journey, textile does not exist in isolation. It is part of society, it is part of culture. When environment changes, society changes, the culture also changes. With climate changes, with the climate changes, many things are changing, many people are changing. And all of us know in last many decades, millions of weavers have left the craft tradition. They don't have hope from the craft tradition because they don't get the value for it. They don't get basic income for it. So many of them, and lot of they have left the craft, and lot of craft, lot of tradition, lot of textiles have died in India in the process. So here, on the other hand, with the climate change, resources are also dying, resources are depleting. The resources which we found earlier, we are not getting. And our houses, our environments where we're living, that is also changing. Our needs are changing. The spaces where we're living, that is also changing. So we must understand it is the need and time, it is the call that we must understand what is sustainable design. Sustainable design that supports the environment, it supports the local business, and it supports the community, and it supports the community. So craft, something like Kerang, which I showed, it died. Dongria Kon, a textile which I showed, that basically that has been translated into different technique, but the community doesn't receive actually the main support because that has been translated into weaving and other techniques, but that community needs support. So there are many crafts which are dying and they may die. In some years, I just want to raise this awareness that it is everybody's contribution. It is everybody must participate in supporting handcrafted tradition, because when you support a craft, you're supporting a very age-old practice, you're supporting the community, and you're supporting the tradition together. And require the role of men and women both. Men also need to wear dhotis and kurtas to support the tradition. So all of us can make it together to support the tradition. So this was my journey, basically a brief journey. I don't want to take long, how basically traveled when I was not sure where I was, I was struggling. What am I doing after completing an IFT studies? When I was working in a, home linen sector in rectangles and square, and then I have reached, from one village to another village here, taking textile narratives together and woven it together. So I basically encourage all of you to contribute, acknowledge, and support handcrafted tradition. Thank you.